Are we ready, everyone? Okay. Hi, let's get started. Welcome. It's delightful to have everyone here to see you, and it's so good to celebrate the launch of yet another book from Lee Upton, right? I mean, how does she do it? My name's Joyce Hinnefeld. We've been friends for many years, and I've admired Lee's work for all that time. Lee's been kind enough to allow me to kind of promote my book, The Dime Museum, which came out last year in August, and I'm grateful for that. And we'll talk a little about some things that maybe we shared in the process of working on these books, but overall, today's a celebration of the Withers. And Lee and I have talked about this a bit, and one of the things that we've talked about, I think because at one point we said, or someone said maybe this could be a discussion of writing speculative fiction. So we had some back and forth about, well, what is that exactly? And that led to I don't know if some of you may be aware of the Margaret Atwood, Ursula Le Guin debate about that term some years ago. And it's basically, I think, a book selling category, as so many things are, so it comes from the publishing industry as much as anything. But we'll talk about that, maybe a bit about our research for the books, their settings, challenges in writing the books, and more. And we'll take questions, of course, from the audience. And should we announce that people have lottery tickets?
Everyone has one?
Yes, so there will be prizes. And then there'll be champagne and cake. But first, let's welcome Lee Upton. I asked if I could do an introduction to her, though I know many of you know her. She's an accomplished poet, essayist, and novelist, and she's widely published in all three genres. She's the author, most recently, of the just published The Withers, the literary mystery Wrongful, published in 2025, and the comic novel Tabitha Get Up, published in 2024. Every year. Her most recent book of poetry is her 7th collection, The Day Every Day Is, winner of the Saturnalia Books Prize in 2023. And now Tabitha Stay Up, which is a sequel to Tabitha Get Up, is forthcoming in September. So they keep coming. She's also the author of 2 wonderful story collections that I adore, 6 other poetry collections, 4 books of literary scholarship, and really one of my favorite of her books, the essay collection Swallowing the Sea, on writing and ambition, boredom, purity, and secrecy. If you haven't read that book, I really recommend it. She's the recipient of countless awards, and she's collaborated with several visual artists and musicians as well. I don't know when Lee sleeps. I'm grateful for the gift of her work. So please join me in applauding Lee, who will tell us more about The Withers and read a bit from the book to get us started.
Well, you can all hear me all right? Okay. I am so happy to see you here. I am so grateful that you're here, grateful to Andy and Gaia for this wonderful bookstore and for always welcoming all of us. Joyce, I have admired her work for so long, and it is just such a treasure to have not only a friendship, but to have her work to read. Her most recent book, The Dime Museum, it's a novel and stories. I've read this twice and worked through and have loved it very much. And I'm just staggered by the multiple settings, the different ages of characters, the interior world of each of these characters, the kind of intermingling of generations. So I can't say enough good things about this. It's really stunning work. So I'm so grateful to be here with Joyce and for Joyce to be here to discuss writing with me. I'll tell you a bit about The Withers. It was a great poster. It's just a beautiful cover. I love this cover. I had asked the publisher not to put a woman on the cover or a man on the cover or even a human person on the cover. I just wanted, a design, but I kind of love this woman now, and I love that they ignored me and did what they think would be best for the novel. The Withers is set in a near future, so it's science fiction, speculative fiction. It's also been called gothic fiction. It's been called also a psychoanalytical thriller. It's set in a near future where much of the northeast of the United States has endured organ collapse among much of the population. At the same time, the culture is in peril from organ traffickers. So in creating the novel, I in some ways worked from a kind of situation that nudged me. That is, I read a newspaper article about a couple. I don't remember now what country they were from, but they were vacationing and died on vacation, both of them. When their bodies were returned to their home country, all of their internal organs were missing. Okay. This was the newspaper article that began the story for me. This hasn't happened in isolation. In some cases, it may be forensic analysis has been done. In other cases, there's suspicion of trafficking. So that newspaper story festered in my mind for quite a while. And then when thinking about organ donation, which is, so life-saving and wonderful, I thought about, the flip side is the rarity of organs. And so, multi-international organizations can be involved in trafficking, in abuse, often of women and children, but abuse of vulnerable populations. So I worked through a lot of research on this, and also about how people, when there's an organ donation, how the body may reject the organ donation. But at the same time, I was thinking about how the whole idea of organ donation and organ trafficking is a kind of matrix from which we can think about a lot of things. We can think about love, for instance, and how embedded in the language of love is a lot about the porousness of the body. And we say, I give you my heart. We have the sense that our bodies are moving together, are merging. So from the idea of organ donation, organ trafficking, for me, it became a kind of rich way to think about a lot of situations within the world. So a way to think through elements of contemporary reality, even though the novel is set in the future. I'm going to read to you just two portions of the novel. One portion that deals with what's called in this near future world the collapse, where organ failure has been harming the culture at root levels. And then I'm going to read you a kind of more emotional portion within this. But before doing that, because this is a psychological thriller, I'd like to give you each to keep a stress ball. I'm going to have my wonderful husband and Steve, if you could all help me. If you could just reach in and take out the balls. Some of the balls say something on them, and other balls just are unmarked. And then I'll read for you. I must say, you might be a bit disappointed because I could read you something very frightening and stressful, but then I would ruin the plot for you, and I would love for you to read the novel. But this is for when you do read the novel and when you come to the parts that are more brutal, I think.
No, I didn't have one. I wish I had that. Oh, thank you.
Yeah, some are big, some are small, some have writing on them. Because there's a good deal about heart donation, some are heart-shaped, and so whatever you pick, it's yours.
So good for your hands.
I was lying awake one night and thinking, how can I make this special? And then I was thinking about stress, as usual. And I thought, oh, stress balls, that's what I'll do. Thanks so much, Steve. I really, really appreciate it. I'm just going to read a bit that helps to tell you a bit about what the withers are. Okay. Bodies were affected differently, some within days, organ failure, frequently of the liver. For others, effects weren't observed for months. Vision blurred, one side of the body rendered off balance. My own case, 7 months elapsed before the full effects registered. My heart, a bit of lung. For many, there would have been no hope of finding enough partially undiseased organs for transplants if synthetics hadn't been available. A battery of tests proved that some of us, the minority, would reject synthetic organs and most antibiotics. Only living human tissue could save us. Astonishing what science accomplished to save so many. A time of marvels, of artificially fully functioning organs, of hybrid organs, of organs genetically designed and grown under laboratory conditions and developing at astonishing rates. As medical interventions continued, rumors spread about evolving microbes and multitudes of newly developed artificial genes implanted experimentally into eggplants and jellyfish and cats and apes, and it was rumored fetal tissue. Human organs could also be made profitable in other forms. What were the limits of the imagination? Those of us who had been ill or who had lost those we loved or had endured both, if we were weak with grief and could hardly hold our heads up, what new world were we prepared for? If I had been a decade older, there would have been no hope for me other than synthetics, which would have proved useless in my case because of genetic resistance. There was no other choice for the surgeons who wanted people like me to survive. So it was that a whole other person's heart was in my body, an alien, a foreign substance. How could I be worthy of that heart? A heart that was taken from a person, most likely a child near death. Anyone could turn questions over until you lost yourself. Organ retrieval was mandated by the authorities, not volunteered by the donor's family or pre-authorized in most cases by a donor. A diseased, fully functioning heart was derived from the newly defined dead, that is, the living victims of the collapse who were determined to be in the process of dying. The process hardly resembled the approved organ transplants of previous organ generations. The new protocols required swift retrieval of organs, a process that family members of the dying patient could not successfully oppose despite voicing their resistance. At Agnes Mercy Hospital, I was mandated for a revisionary experimental heart transplant according to those new protocols. One of the effects of the transplant of the diseased heart I received, I was marked with withers. A wave of scalded-looking skin moved up from my right ankle to just under my right eye, partially breaking off again, and then reaching to my hairline, missing most of my nose, but not part of my lips. Among us with withers, the patterns differed, although they were never less than dramatic. It was as though something terrible and deadly inside me rose up and climbed to the surface of my skin, and the withered traced that ascent. Maybe it was inevitable that those marked like me were held in contempt from those whose bodies were healthy or were made in part of synthetic substances, materials that were never alive. Those of us with withers bore the evidence of the trauma we all wanted to forget. I think an unusual thing about the book was that it's the third novel of mine to be published, but it's the first novel to have been written. It was the whole plot was conceived before COVID, and I think that's why it's speculative fiction in a sense, because even before COVID, in creating the plot, I worked out, likely things that would happen in what here is an epidemic rather than a pandemic. There'd be controversial theories about the origin of this particular epidemic. There would be medical startups. There would be rushed procedures, certainly. There would be conspiracy theories. And then, when COVID struck, it was uncanny that the novel already had those elements in place. But I think they came out of just thinking about what would happen. I also think in some ways, epidemics just never end. I mean, COVID doesn't end, certainly. And what I think was a major kind of gear turning within the novel for me was about forgetfulness, that even with COVID, we tend to forget how many had died, how many had suffered, how our life had changed irreversibly in some ways. And in the culture I created in this near future world, the reason why people are so cruel to people with withers is partly because of it's assumed that their organs may have been retrieved according to these new protocols from a child who wasn't truly dead yet. That there was a lot of experimentation within the culture and through a kind of arrogant medical network, but also because people want to forget in this culture. And when they see people marked with the withers, they target them partly because they make people remember what they suffered. So when I wrote this, I'm going to read just one other paragraph. I found, through this idea of organ donation and the beauty of that, but also organ trafficking and the horror of that, this sense that, we're talking about human compulsions. The novel in some ways is about 3 love stories. One love story is about friendship, a deep, deep, wonderful friendship between my main character, Riata, and another woman with withers, Diana, and their mutual love for one another, their loyalty, their deep understanding. Another love story in the novel is between Riata and her best friend since she was a teenager. And that love story, I think, develops in yet another direction. And then there's finally a love story that is pain-filled and full of betrayal. So in working with organ trafficking, in some ways, I'm working with guilt, with loyalty, with love, with betrayal, with all the ways that we can affect one another. Here's the paragraph, and my character, Riata, is thinking about obsession because she develops an obsessive focus on a man, okay? What is an obsession, and how does obsession work? Because I know it's active, isn't it? Maybe if you're obsessed, you have a brain that's starved for attention and security. Maybe obsession works because the object of your obsession is unreliable. Now you see him, now you don't. Obsession needs instability, needs one person to pull away so that the other person struggles to reclaim that person. It could be that obsession is a form of competition in which you battle your past, proving that at last you will be loved. Maybe obsession takes on full velocity only when you delude yourself into thinking that there are moments of pure, sweet pleasure before they're torn away. Is that how obsession works? You might as well go horseback riding and spend your day exhilarated and jumping over fences, and as soon as you dismount, you let the horse kick you in the head. Oh, thank you for listening to those questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joyce.
Well, you answered the one question, and I'd forgotten that you did tell me about that article that brought this on, and that this took shape in your mind before COVID. We did talk about that. I think I'd like you to talk a little bit more about the condition of the withers and the how that emerged for you as a representation, a marking of, and the way it's a beautifully, painfully rendered account of how we turn people into the other.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so interesting to think that we do that because of we're being reminded of trauma.
Mm-hmm.
We could probably, apply that to a lot of situations
Mm-hmm.
where that's what's happening with us when we can't look at someone, when we don't want to be around someone, that there's some deeply personal reaction going on there. But I mean, I look at this and I've been so struck by that image because it does sort of look like henna decorations, and I think that conjures all kinds of possibilities too for what we do with other people of other cultures. And so could you say a little more about how that came to you as a way of, is that something that actually, I mean, how much of this is rooted in things you read or possibilities that you knew really existed, or?
Yeah, I think ostracism is so horrific, and when I give her a backstory, this character, she had been she has suffered. By the time you get to the novel, there's a little bit we learn about her backstory, but she lost her mother as a child. She loses her baby daughter to the collapse. She nearly loses her life. She was in grief and didn't even recognize when she was getting ill because she was in such grief, But there was a part of her life where, up until the collapse in the culture, she was a dancer. And I think that was very compelling for me because she was someone who used her body as her art publicly. So she was most confident in her life on a stage, and she felt that she felt this strength through her body, that she could move an audience. She was in various foster homes. She learned from one of the homes when the children went to dance lessons and came back. She'd learned in the garage. So she had this background of using her body as an art, but because of the withers, she is marked. She's also physically ill. It was compelling, I think, to write about a character who is always exhausted, and in some ways cannot get independence in the world. She can't get a medical certificate to work. She's not strong enough to work. She has to live through charity. She lives in the house of the surgeon who saved her life. And so she's a dependent in a way. If she goes outside of that area, she lives in a development where very wealthy people, doctors mainly, high-level surgeons live there. She's always under surveillance in a sense. So now she's watched, but she's watched by people who are repulsed by her because of these markings, or who see her as a kind of medical experiment. So it is such a shift for her. I think part of the development in the novel is, as you look at her and how she develops as a character, is she begins through a kind of brutal incident that she knows about. She begins to rethink what it means to have a relationship with her body and to be marked in a culture, and to learn to rethink it, think things that we're told about beauty and acceptability and attractiveness and health even. So that idea of the withers, of that idea, it's looking at the culture, how the culture has withered. There's a lot about plants in the novel too, and her dearest friend is a kind of landscaper, and so that idea of root damage in the culture and how to survive it is very much a part of the novel.
Yes, thank you. There are so many connections that I need to read it again. for the same reason, because I feel like there's a lot that I read for the story, of course, and it is very compelling. You're wondering what will happen to Rihanna, and quite worried about her through this book. I wish I had this. Can we, is there anything else you want to say about the research? Because I can't help but imagine that you must have read medical articles. I mean, you had to have gone pretty deeply into...
I did, but I tell you, the one great thing about writing science fiction or speculative fiction, whatever you want to call it, is that you can make up all sorts of things, and no one can say that's not how it goes. So I get new protocols. So the basis was seeing, okay, what's available now? What happens when you go through organ donation, and how to get a match with the right tissue and all. But then I could change all those rules, and that was a tremendous amount of freedom. And I also think the sense that people would be. In a way, the withers, we're all marked with withers. We're continually marked by our life experiences, and sometimes it's invisible to other people. I wrote in a short story I know years ago about how we all have these invisible tattoos. We're all kind of continually marked by our experiences and our trauma. I always think of the poet Denise Levertov, who has this wonderful anecdote about a dog, and I love writing about dogs, but how you can have the most friendly, wonderful dog, but if you touch it on the head at a certain place, it will bite you because it's sore. And I think that about human beings too. We can be pleasant and kind, but if we're touched in a certain way, we can bite. We have to be really careful not to bite somehow.
There's a wonderful dog here. I won't say more, but there's a great dog in this.
Well, I want to ask about research for your novel, because your novel travels so widely and moves through generations. And also, I was so fascinated. There's so much about poetry in this novel. And I remember teaching about Ezra Pound and using the Norton Anthology of Modern Poetry. And in that introduction to the portion about Ezra Pound, of course, it deals with his fascism and his radio broadcasts, but it also deals with the time at Wabash College when he was kicked out because there was a lady in his room, and you took that and you went to town with it and you opened it up with this beautiful act of speculation. So could you talk about
where
that?
The speculative idea comes in, right? So we talked a little about that. Well, all fiction is speculative, for starters. You're imagining a world and a time, and you can go forward or backward, right? So this was imagining a historically real event, and nothing was known about this woman. And when I started work on this book, I was pretty caught in how little we know about the women in the lives of these big modernist icons. So Ezra Pound, Albert Barnes, Wallace Stevens, the women who supported them in their lives and their careers, are kind of overlooked, or in Wallace Stevens' case, the wife is seen as having been kind of a burden. And I think that's what made me think I'd make her up. And then, I got so interested in, she was a vaudeville performer. What did that mean? We do know that. He brought her back to his room because she missed the train out of town, and on a snowy night. That much was known. So I think it comes from what you're describing, just this sense of knowing and feeling strong, a lot of sadness about what happens to people, and recognizing things in the culture that historically and in the likely future have happened and will happen again because of all the ways in which we've put up blinders or afraid. So, what's amazing about this, being shaped pre-COVID, is you could write about the likelihood of the rules all changing for organ transplant. That's hard for me to imagine, right? You know, I feel like for so long and for so much of our lives, we've thought medicine is this kind of sacrosanct thing. You know, research is crucial. The right thing will be done. And how many of us now aren't so sure? You know, I think you really capture something about the reality of how, I mean, I think there's always been a kind of, you know, I remember being young and defiant about doctors, and I don't trust what this male doctor is telling me, et cetera, et cetera. But what's happened is alarming. Resistance to vaccinations, you know, and just mistrust of the medical establishment, mistrust of science. So I feel like when you say you can make it up because you're writing speculative fiction or science fiction, it's true, but it's got to feel believable. And I'm struck by how believable this is. So you knew what the protocols would be, but you also knew how they might very well change under duress. And that's, I think, what is so fascinating about it to me. It's that what people are capable of. And in Ezra Pound's case, you know, interestingly, I guess I was prepared to just, you know, think he was a madman and a kind of spiteful and hateful person in many ways who unfortunately wrote great poetry. But he was also a compassionate man. You know, he had the capacity to take in this woman. And so owning that and writing about that in a way that had to acknowledge that reality of that human complexity, I think is similar. I would love to hear you talk a little bit about this housing development. There's one house that's not where it's not cared for properly, right? And I love that, you know. And this character is interesting. Do you want to say a little bit about that?
Yeah. So there is one house in the development that's really messy outside, and where the character will. I don't want to give too much away, but sometimes messy people are wonderful, you know, but she's held in suspicion. You know, I remember once I was, you know, working on a novel, and I thought, you know, how can I bring it alive? And I thought, oh, somebody has to die. And that was a horrible feeling. But in some of these novels, some of the short stories too, I was really surprised at the characters. I'm not going to say which characters meet their fate, but I always used to think I could never, you know, harm a character because I love them so much. But then in the world of fiction, terrible things happen to characters, and I'm always a little shocked when it happens, and sometimes it's hard for me to write those chapters, but there's a kind of inevitability in some of the novels I write where some things become necessary within that world. I was thinking lately a little bit about relationships with characters, and I was thinking that, you know, you think of how long you spend on a novel. You spend at least 60,000 words, usually. It's usually, you know, you're working with a character over multiple years. So I think you develop a kind of affinity, or you develop a bond. And so I tend to think of the characters, no matter their fate, almost in terms of a kind of developing friendship. And I try to treat them in a kind of friendly way, in part, in that, you know, within this story, there's a development, as Joyce mentions, and different sorts of characters. And some of them I treat as a kind of friend because I'm spending so much time with them. And with a friend, you wouldn't pretend you know everything your friend thinks. You wouldn't bully a friend into believing what they should believe. And with a friend, you always realize you don't know enough. You don't understand everything about a friend. And I want that to be the case with the characters I work with too, that there's always more to discover, that I give them a kind of independence. And then at the same time, I realize, unlike friendships, you don't kill your friends. Don't do that. You don't test them, you don't trouble them. But to figure out a character, you put them in trouble, I think, to figure out their world. Nor do you gossip about your friends. And a novel's like a long gossip session about a character. So that thinking about the people in this development, I needed to have different sorts of people, and those are figured. There's one person who differs from the others, because otherwise it's a sort of claustrophobic, ultra hygienic environment, and the one person out of place is a kind of clue to where the betrayals are happening within this world.
Right. It's very deftly handled, and you must read to learn more about that. Well, the last question I want to ask before we open this up to others' questions is about ghosts and the creation of a book that Riata, her friend, gets for her. It's called Ghost Chronicles, a Commonplace Book. It is described on page 35 as speculative. I marked it. And then there are some sample entries from the book on page 158. I assume you created this, and it's brilliant. And it's interesting to me how all along you've been sort of taking us toward considerations of ghosts, what that means in the lives of people who are mourning and who've experienced tremendous loss. And then it becomes increasingly important in the book. Could you say a bit about when that occurred to you and how you decided to create this book?
Thank you. I would love to talk about that. I was visiting my daughter and son-in-law and their baby recently, and I kept talking to my son-in-law about that, about how I think sometimes in novels, you have to have these multiple, almost like floating barges to keep the novel from sinking into one plot. In the Commonplace book, until I created these portions, they're quotations within a book, handwritten, that are found at kind of a thrift shop, that a character who cares for Riata gives her. And Riata, who's lost her baby daughter and her mother, is at first reluctant, even though the book is so beautiful, she's immediately attracted to it. She's reluctant to read these because it's clear they're written by someone who is in grief and trying to determine if there's an afterlife or not. So the person is assembling quotations from many books written all, early in the 20th century up till about the 30s or so, where people try to figure out if there's an afterlife and where people write about their experiences with ghosts. And so I had to take about 10 of those out because they were just suffocating the novel. I loved writing them. It's a little bit, some things you love to write. I loved writing the comic novel about Tabitha, and I loved writing those commonplace book quotations. The language is very archaic, it's very formal, but it's all about, should we believe that our dead beloveds are with us? Will they return? Are they already with us? And for her, they offer at some moments a kind of clarity. They kind of in a way, how supposedly horoscopes or the tarot will help you see your life in a different way. So too, they sometimes can almost alert her. So it's a thread, almost a supernatural thread in the novel, because I always want the fiction I write to work, on the physical plane, a kind of cultural plane, an emotional plane, a relational plane, but I also want there to be some sense of the spiritual, or something about mortality, or beyond just the physical. And so those commonplace portions help me to keep the novel afloat, in a sense.
Oh, that's beautiful. I see that. And
Thanks, Joyce.
Brilliantly done. I thought, we made this up, but boy, does it sound like anyone would find in a thrift store. It's just so well done. Well, okay. Let's see if there are other questions from our audience. I could ask you questions all day, but probably I shouldn't do that.
I have a couple of comments. I was Googling a lot of those quotations to see if they're
Right, yeah.
But it was a great book. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Two sentences that really jumped out at me because how it's toward the end of the book, very end of the book. how easy it is to take for granted those who love us habitually. It's a remarkable thing to be known and loved nevertheless. That was really good. And as far as the collapse, it reminded me true of COVID, but it also put me in mind of the AIDS epidemic.
Mm-hmm.
Because I thought people at that time, people were so visibly ill.
Yes, yes, and they're
It
marked,
was like
yes.
a withers of a sort, and they couldn't hide, and we didn't know. People wanted to be away from those people, and so that's reminded me of that. But it scared me.
Thank you, that's the highest praise, thank you, I appreciate that. I hadn't made that connection to AIDS, and I should have. Thank you for making that connection.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. So true. Good comparison. Zen?
Heidi, congratulations.
Thank you.
On yet another book. We're also happy for you. I'm thinking so much about the plot you all are talking about the physical aspects of the body. But what you just read, it just reminded me, like, when you're writing about the past or the future, or the far past, which would be like 1970, right? Or even farther past, how like an inner life is really timeless. Different generations, fathers and sons fight, mothers and daughters, people fall in love, like you were saying. So what struck me most about the book also was just the way the inner life is reflected in the body. And if you could just talk a little bit about that aspect of developing the character. Like, I really felt that in the ghost aspects too, or the quotations. But you really have a sense of the emotional life of the characters. And so I'm just interested in like how you built that with the body, like, and how the body reveals the internal.
She sleeps a lot, she's so exhausted, but she tries, I think, to just pull herself out of that as much as she can. But I think, we've all dealt with illnesses that exhaust us, and we find ourselves needing to recuperate. So also I thought, I gave her a little kind of a bracelet, that can be calibrated in different ways. So what I did, I think, to give her an inner life was partly to think about the outer life. How many people are looking at her, how they look at her. At one point, there's a party and at the house where she's staying as a kind of sanctuary, and the party is supposed to make her feel better. And in a way it does for one moment, because she meets two people who are comical and joking, and she realizes that she tells them something that she hopes is funny, and they really laugh, and she laughs, and she realizes then that she hasn't really laughed full-heartedly. And so I think, the inner life always has to be coordinated with a kind of outer life. So certain people she meets, she feels suspicion toward, one person in particular, because the person reminds her of a person from her childhood who had treated her unkindly. These other people that she meets give her a sense of what she's missing in her life. The life is it's almost as if she's in, a petri dish herself, because she cannot go far from that development where she lives. If she goes somewhere, it has to kind of be approved ahead of time, or her friends have to figure it out. It's her one friend, Diana, who also has withers, who takes her out to kind of unapproved places. And then at the same time, they can be shouted at in the street and called names too. So to go back to your sense of the inner life, I think I was always shuttling between how she's treated, that what mirror the world holds up to her, and then giving her time to rest and think and gather herself and decide if that reflection is really adequate somehow. I think too she suffers some, a horrific loss late in the novel. The novel starts speeding up, and that she has to what she has to deal with is an old belief she's had, and reality has to obstruct that belief. It has to puncture that belief. And that's, I think, how, for me, to get at the inner world of this character primarily, to see what she believes and then how the world is going to militate against that belief and how she'll have to set up a new belief. And a lot of that belief is about her own body and her sense of what her body can do, even though she's so very ill, and not allow others to confine her within certain calcified notions of her own illness. So that's sort of going back and forth for me, is how I got to the inner was to always work with the outer as well.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
I love those characters at the party. I think it's the brother and sister, right?
Yeah, they were a brother and sister.
And one is an anesthesiologist.
Anesthesiologist.
Which I just thought was perfect, because that's the person that will have this kind of view of doctors from, that's sort of cynical and humorous and kind of sees through the surgeon's pride. I love that. I love those characters very much. I kind of wanted them around more for her. I was wishing she could be around them more. Any other questions? Yes?
Yeah, thank you. So I have a comment and also words of gratitude and also surprise. I'm pretty sure that you wrote it after the pandemic. So it's a real surprise for me that you started writing before, because it reads like a real deep intellectual and spiritual working what we went through the pandemic. It's one. And also the commonplace book. I was pretty sure this was authentic, and you just dug out some antiquated passages, which were perfect. But I think that with the spiritual aspect, the kind of metaphysical aspect that her body marks, the kind of tattoos of the suffering that she has, and the trauma that you talk at a certain point, you talk about the DNA of suffering that comes out in body and is actually inheritable, right? That's such an incredible passage that goes together with this search for connection with people who died, who are lost, through her dialogue in this book, right? Trying to connect with the notion that there is an afterlife, and those people that she has lost, she might have, she might meet again, she might be in connection. It's just very beautiful, the tangible, the bodily trauma kind of presence in the body with the notion of her connection with.
Thank you so much, Monica. Thank you, Monica.
Anybody else?
I should ask, does everyone have a lottery ticket? No, is there anyone without a lottery ticket?
Who doesn't have it?
I guess I'll do these first. I have 4 gifts,
Okay.
4 prizes, and then I'll have you do the other.
Okay. And I forgot, it's a food one. The glass is a food one balance.
That's right. Gaia, when Eric brings the bag around, can I have you pick out the first one? The first one. Yeah, the first one. What if you get your own number?
Then you get
Yeah. And,
I think everyone's accounted for.
everyone's accounted for. Okay. I'm going to have Gaia pick out the first one. Okay. The winner, there are several prizes. 625 47-011. Oh, Monica, great. Monica, you get, is this correct? I'm not sure which one is this. You get this great blanket. Yeah. So, applause for Monica. Thank you. Okay, and Andy, could you do the next one? Okay, this is 62547-021. Oh, great. Okay. And you get, this is your prize. Yes, I need all these books.
That's first.
Thanks, honey. Okay. Stephen, could I have you be the next person? Okay. And this is 62547-025. Okay. And you win a pair of socks that say, "I'd rather be reading." Okay, so
Good to wear those just near.
Judy, could you come up and do the next one? The next one is 62547-000.
Are you kidding me?
Judy! I love it. And you get Bag Ladies tea. That sounds good. Bag Ladies tea. Where is human nature so weak as in a bookstore? And you can't get a cup of tea big enough for a book long enough to suit me by C.S. Lewis. So all your tea bags have literary quotations.
Okay, I have some prizes too, and I will just say that Lee reminded me, because I had forgotten, that the malady causing the collapse is a foodborne malady. I chose interestingly. Yes, do you want to come, and I don't know your name. Michelle, please come and draw a number for us. Hopefully I will find a number. 62547-004. That's you. Well, you can come and take a pick if you have to come up and look, because there are 3 food items in here that you can choose from, and I don't want to reveal what the others are. I think they're okay.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. And I believe I know you, but I'm not thinking of your name.
Rosemary.
Rosemary. Come and draw one. 62547-003. Okay. Isn't it fun when they call your number? That's only happened to me maybe twice.
I want to stretch this out.
Ooh, cherries.
Okay, Ruth, you can come and draw the next one. This is the last one. Thank you. 62547-022.
Great. Thank you all. Much applause to Joyce for leading us here, our MC, our wonderful MC. And we'll sign any books that you have. And also there's cake, there's champagne, the works out there. So please join us in celebrating this launch. So